Hi, I'm Laurie. My brother came home for family support, and my mom threw me out of my own house. They drained my savings, erased my name from every memory, and burned the proof of my life like I was never there. But the neighbors? They called me the owner. Do you want to know what happened next? This sets an immediate emotional punch. Betrayal, erasure, shocking twist, and ends on an open cliffhanger that invites the viewer to. I came home just after 8. My apron still smelled like grease and burnt toast. I kicked off my shoes at the door and noticed right away there were two extra pairs. One of them was a scuffed pair of boots, mud still drying on the sole. The other, sneakers I hadn't seen in years. The lights in the living room were on. I could hear the low hum of the TV and my mother's laugh, light, sharp, almost girlish. A kind of laugh I hadn't heard in a long time. My stomach turned. I'm 44, divorced for nearly a decade, been living here in this modest home in Sacramento ever since. Middle-class neighborhood, though rents were climbing so fast, I sometimes wondered how long we could hold on. I stayed because Mom needed someone. Because someone had to. I dropped my keys into the bowl and stepped inside. The couch was occupied. Jed, my brother, he looked up like it was nothing. Hey, sis. That night, everything I thought I knew about family support flipped on its head. He had bags with him. Not a small overnight thing either. 2 duffels and a backpack shoved near the hallway closet like he was planning to settle. I just needed a break, Jed said, shrugging like a teenager. Nevada's been rough lately. Mom said I could crash here a while. I blinked. She did? Yeah, he said, already half turning toward the kitchen. Said I could stay as long as I need. I smiled, or something close to it, but my brain was already spinning. Mom hadn't said a word, not a hint, not a call, just, he's here now. Jed had always been the one to vanish. Jobs, towns, relationships. He burned through them like fire through dry brush, borrowed money, made promises, disappeared again. And now he was back. No shame, no warning. Just rolled in and planted himself like the prodigal son. I'd been wiping down counters, clipping Mom's toenails, managing her meds, keeping the roof over our heads. And he got a hero's welcome. Over the next few days, things started shifting, quietly but steadily. Jed would take over the remote, flipping channels while I washed dishes. He'd lean over Mom's shoulder and suggest what she should eat, things I'd already cooked. Once I made her favorite chicken stew. Before I could serve it, Jed grinned and said, "Ma, I'm ordering pizza. You want pepperoni or sausage?" She laughed. I told myself it was temporary. Just him needing time. But it felt like the house was rearranging itself around him. The worst part? Mom was happier. She smiled more when he was around, laughed louder, talked longer, and I began to disappear in plain sight. One night, she handed him the ceramic mug I always used, white with little blue flowers. It had a crack on the handle I fixed with glue. "I thought that was mine," I said. She blinked. "Oh, I didn't realize." But I think she did. Then I found it. In the mail basket, under some grocery coupons, a piece of forwarded mail, addressed to Jed, then another, and another, all rerouted from Nevada. One even looked like it came from the DMV. He wasn't visiting. Jed started chatting up neighbors like he never left. Told Mrs. Helms next door that he was settling back into his childhood home. Childhood home. Like I hadn't been here keeping it afloat. Mom started calling him the man of the house. I kept vacuuming, cooking, hauling in groceries, and now I was cleaning after him too. That night, I roasted salmon. Jed ordered Thai. Mom told me not to make a fuss. I stared at my plate, untouched, and wondered when the last time someone asked me what I wanted was. The more I bit my tongue, the more I felt it swell, rage, resentment, humiliation, but I didn't say anything. Not yet. Then it got worse. Mail kept coming. Jed's name printed on more envelopes. I went out one morning and grabbed the stack before anyone else did. IRS, credit card companies, medical bills. I sat down at the kitchen table, holding one letter open, and waited for Mom. When she came in, I didn't smile. "Is he moving in?" She didn't even pause. "He needs help, Laurie. More than you do right now." I sat there, stunned. I'd spent years building my life around her, around this house, around responsibility, and it was like none of it mattered. Later that night, I went to my room, still turning her words over in my mind like hot coals. My hand reached for the doorknob, but it wasn't there, just a hole in the door where it used to be. I wasn't just being pushed aside, I was being prepared for removal. Morning after the doorknob vanished, I got up before the sun did. I couldn't sleep, not with that empty space where a knob should be, a subtle message nailed into wood. I made my way toward the kitchen, hoping for silence, for the comfort of my routine. But the sound of clinking spoons and muffled laughter met me before I reached the hallway. They were already up, Mom and Jed, sitting across from each other like a cozy sitcom couple sharing inside jokes over coffee. My seat was taken. So was my mug. In its place on the counter sat a chipped ceramic one I didn't recognize. Not even the decency of letting me have my morning. I stood still in the doorway, letting the moment settle on me like dust. "She'll adjust," Mom said, not even bothering to look in my direction. She didn't use my name, and yet she was talking about me like I wasn't there, as if I were a problem to be solved, like someone else's mail or an old receipt on the counter. Folks in this neighborhood used to say, "Family's your anchor," but no one ever tells you what to do when the anchor starts pulling you under. I took the chipped mug, filled it with whatever stale coffee was left, and sat down at the edge of the kitchen table, barely listening as Jed launched into a story about some job that screwed him over again. Mom hung on every word like it was gospel. Then came the bomb. "We were thinking," Mom said, smoothing the wrinkles in her floral housecoat, "it might be easier if Jed used your room, just for a while." My spoon paused mid-stir. "You want me to move out of my room?" "Temporarily," she said, as if she were suggesting I change seats at church. "You could take the guest room, or maybe stay with that friend of yours. What's her name, Tasha?" I laughed, just once, sharp and quiet. "You do realize I've been paying this mortgage." Mom looked at me with the kind of calm that only ignorance or cruelty could produce. "It's still in my name." And just like that, 2 decades of caretaking, grocery runs, ER visits, and holding her through panic attacks, erased with one line. Jed looked away, tried to feign discomfort, but the corners of his mouth twitched. He was enjoying this. "I'm sorry, sis," he said, voice dipped in fake remorse. "You know how hard things have been since Carla left. I just need time to land on my feet." He reached across the table and squeezed Mom's hand. She melted. He was playing the victim, and she was buying every word. I didn't miss the way he angled his phone on the table, screen lit with messages. One of them showed a listing, furniture for sale, garage full of stuff. Not ours. His. He wasn't here to rest. He was circling. I left the table without another word and headed for my room, closing the door, what was left of it, behind me. I stood in the middle of the space, scanning corners, measuring. Jed's boxes would fit easily. They'd already planned this. I sat on the bed and gripped the edge, grounding myself. Maybe I was being dramatic. Maybe I was just tired. But another voice, one I hadn't heard in years, rose in me. My old boss, Denise. She once told me over black coffee and stale donuts, "If you teach people you're disposable, they'll dispose of you." That line hit different now. I wasn't just being moved, I was being replaced. Still barefoot, I stepped outside. The morning air hit my face like a slap. Cool. Grounding. Across the street, Mrs. Ellison was watering her roses. She waved. "Well, look at you," she smiled. "Running this place like a captain, still taking care of Mom?" I nodded. "You always were the backbone of this house," she added, eyes kind. "Your mom's lucky to have you." That shifted something. It was small, but it stuck. Someone out here still saw me, still saw the work I'd done, the years I gave. I went back inside slowly. My hands were steadier. At the top of the stairs, I saw it. My door, my room, was open. Jed stood in the doorway, shoving his duffel bags inside. He didn't see me. He just kept moving, arranging his things like it was already his. Mom passed by with a folded sheet set in her arms. She looked at me and smiled, a practiced, flat smile. "This will be good for everyone," she said. I didn't answer. I slipped my hand into my coat pocket and felt the old wooden horse keychain Dad gave me when I was 12. They think I'm silent because I'm weak. They're about to learn the difference. That night, while they celebrated in the kitchen, I began my quiet escape plan. Stepped into what was supposed to be the guest room, only to find half of it already claimed. Cardboard boxes, duffel bags, and gym weights filled the space. My trophies, the ones Dad brought me from work trips, were shoved in a corner under an old blanket. The framed wedding photo of Mom and Dad had slid off the shelf and lay dusty on the floor. I picked it up, holding it by one corner, and felt the frame tremble. They gave me 4 walls, but never the right to fill them. At dinner, Mom beamed as she announced she had helpfully moved more of my things, journals, photographs, and work files, to the porch in a box. "You'll thank me," she said. I walked out behind her in the dusk light and found the box waiting by the front door. Inside were bits of me, pages I'd penned in private, designs I'd drawn, letters I never mailed. Jed cracked a grin. "Maybe now you'll have time for a hobby." I pressed my lips, counting heartbreak and rage, but offered a polite nod. In the dim glow of my room later, I rifled through that box, pulling out an old refinancing budget sheet signed by me, evidence I saved our house when Dad passed. I remembered sitting with tax papers late into the night, reading every clause so we wouldn't lose this home. That memory throbbed with betrayal. They sold my labor as invisible. If I don't claim my space, someone else will. I crept downstairs one night and overheard Jed on speakerphone. "I'm not here for long-term help, just getting on my feet." Mom asked, "Need a place to rest?" He replied, "Thanks, that's more than most will offer." He wasn't hiding behind support, he was laying groundwork. I froze in the dark. The path ahead became clear. I must expose the lie. Back in my room, lantern light bouncing off walls, I gathered files, scanned pages, and copied evidence into a new folder on a USB. Label: "If they push too far." I felt calm, determined. The laughter of them downstairs echoed in my ears, Mom's soft giggle, his brash voice. I whispered to myself, "They think I don't see. They're about to learn I always have." That night, I left before dawn. Walked silently across lawns. The street lamps flickered above. I was heading somewhere, not running, not retreating, but going to find someone who remembered me before all this. Before the boxes, before the erasure, before they erase me, I needed someone who remembers who I am. Felt. I paused at the entryway. My shoes were gone. The old pair I wore daily moved to the basement. A small gesture, but it echoed. In the living room, Jed's voice floated, Mom's laughter behind it. That laugh. They shared something I no longer recognized as mine. Dad used to say, "A home is shaped by respect, not walls." I touched the doorframe, steadying myself. The space felt foreign, like someone else had drawn the lines now. At breakfast, Mom and Jed sat across from me. Jed pushed forward a framed certificate of appreciation for leadership in adversity. Mom clapped, eyes bright, as if scoring a trophy for the one who least deserved it. He glanced at me and said, "Mom, you know how driven I've always been." I swallowed bile. I knew that certificate didn't mention bankruptcies, empty promises, or debts he hid. It was a carefully crafted narrative. He deserves this place. Betrayal sat between us, thick and undenied. Later, a virtual meeting with neighbors and church members took place. Mom introduced Jed as the homeowner of our family. My name wasn't there, not a whisper. My heart clenched, but I swallowed the urge to interrupt. Humiliation pressed on me like an old wound reopened. The room listened to him, not me. Back in my room, I laid out what I knew. My name erased from mail, my bills paid by me, files shuffled aside. I traced every slight, every omission, every decision made without me. I reminded myself, if they tell the world I'm not here, maybe I'll force them to see me. My resolve cooled into strategy. That afternoon, Alma stopped by to weed the front flower bed. She greeted me, then turning to Jed to say, "Congrats on your new role as homeowner." I paused, then spoke. "Actually, they still consider me the owner." Her brow furrowed, a shift in her eyes. For a moment, her voice wavered. That hiccup in certainty mattered. It meant someone outside knew I hadn't vanished. At night, I sat at my laptop, heart hammering. I opened an email. Foreclosure warning, owner in default. My hands shook as I saw the sender, Gideon's attorney. They weren't just pushing me out, they were trying to erase me. My throat went dry. I leaned back, pressing into the chair. They think they can erase me invisibly, but I was very present indeed. I didn't notice right away. I was halfway to the grocery store when I realized the gas needle was hugging empty. I'd filled up just a couple days ago. Something didn't add up. Back in the driveway, I unlocked the fuel door and bent down. The smell hit me first. Sharp, raw. Someone had siphoned it out. Inside the garage, the spare keys I always kept in the drawer were gone. Not misplaced. Gone. Jed used to sneak my keys when he was a teenager. Thought it was a game. This wasn't a game. This was control. Quiet, calculated control. It wasn't just the gas. It was the message. "I see you trying to move," it said. "Now sit still." But I didn't feel fear. Just clarity. He was getting sloppy. Later that morning, I heard them in the dining room, Jed and Mom. Their voices soft, like they were planning something delicate. "Just a dinner," I heard her say. "Nothing fancy." I waited until the words drifted down in full. "A little family celebration." I stepped in. "What's being celebrated?" I asked. Mom turned with a half smile. "Just having some neighbors over, dear. Nothing formal." I glanced at the stack of envelopes on the buffet. One was already open, thick cardstock inside. At the top, "Hosted by Jed Hollis." Not my name, not our name, just his. Like I was a ghost in my own house. I let the silence hang a beat longer than was comfortable, then smiled back. "Then I'll bring dessert," I said, voice level. My fingers tightened around the chair, just once. I had a renovation meeting that afternoon. A contractor I'd worked with for years. We'd fixed up half the east wing together. I pulled up to the site and walked over, expecting the usual handshake. Instead, he turned before I reached him. "I got a call," he said. "Jed's the contact now. I can't help you." No apology, no eye contact, just distance. I looked at the clipboard in his hand. The handwriting wasn't mine. He'd been briefed, thoroughly. I didn't ask who'd told him. I already knew. Gideon. He'd been leaking my plans, quietly shifting everything to Jed's side of the board. I nodded once. "Thanks for letting me know." I walked back to my car with my chin high, but inside, it cut deep. Not because I lost a contractor, but because someone I trusted let go of me without hesitation. Evening crept in slow. I sat alone in my study, blinds half drawn. The room was cluttered with boxes of my own making, files, receipts, records. I started sorting. Each page was another reminder of what I'd done to keep this house upright. HVAC repairs from 2018, roof inspections I scheduled, garden work, pest control, everything, piece by piece, I laid it out, not for memory's sake, for proof. My hands moved faster than my thoughts. For every line Jed took credit for, I had 5 he never touched. I paused at one note. SEPTA 2020, tree removal, south fence, $1,200. I wrote that check. I watched them haul it away. I didn't just own labor, I muttered. I owned responsibility, and responsibility has weight. My fingers moved to the keyboard. I started drafting a letter to legal aid, not as a cry for help, as a strategy. Dinner that night was quieter than usual. Maybe they felt the tension. Maybe I was imagining it. I sat at the end of the table, eyes on my plate, letting the moment find me. I saw the invitations, I said flatly. Jed's name, not mine. Mom blinked once. People confuse things when names change, she said, cutting her meat. I folded my napkin slowly. Confuse it? Or rewrite history? Jed looked up, trying for a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. The fork in his hand hovered midair. Then the knock came. Our neighbor Alma, peeking her head in through the open patio door. Hey, sorry to interrupt, she said. Is Laurie still part of the family? No one answered right away. The silence cracked something open. I held Alma's gaze. Depends on who you ask, I said. The room didn't recover after that. When the dishes were done and everyone had drifted off into their corners, I went upstairs to my old room. Jed had been using it for storage, boxes of his things stacked against the walls, but I wasn't looking for his stuff. I pulled the dresser away from the wall. Behind it, taped flat, was a photo of Dad. I remembered hiding it there when they packed his belongings up too quickly after the funeral. I flipped it over. My handwriting stared back at me. One day they'll understand. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just stood there, holding that photo like a vow. Tonight, I whispered, I begin to undo their lies. I walked into the living room and froze. The family photo album lay open on the coffee table, pages fanned like evidence. I flipped it carefully. My childhood portraits were still in the front, before new family photos of Jed and Mom together. The crinkle of the paper startled me. I remembered the day Dad stepped in and promised me I would always have a place here. That promise felt hollow now. My pulse sped. A shadow shifted behind me. Someone watching. I turned a page and froze. My portrait was torn, a jagged corner missing. Jed stood nearby, leaning on a shelf, eyes locked onto mine. His mouth curved, falsely casual. Oh, I thought that was an old draft from your art class, he said. His tone mocked innocence. But the damage was deliberate. In that moment, I felt both erased and more present than ever. He'd torn me out. But I was still here. The ripping was public. The humiliation literal. I moved toward the cabinet and opened it. My painting, the one Gideon had once dismissed, was partially burned, its edges blackened. Smoke stain marked the wall. I caught the smell in the air. Jed stepped forward, arms crossed. Not everything is preserved, sister, he said, voice cool. I bit my lip to keep from screaming, but I refused to collapse in grief. This was a message, not an accident. He was burning memories, trying to erase identity. I stood unmoving. I retreated to my study, hands trembling slightly. I laid out every document I'd collected: photo scraps, journal entries, repair logs, expense records. I placed the torn portrait next to the burnt canvas. I traced each line with my finger, naming every loss. Then I imagined a courtroom, my voice steady, evidence in hand. I composed a message to Clarabelle Knox, telling her exactly where to begin. This wasn't emotional outburst. It was a reclamation. Dinner was heavy. I stood abruptly during the main course, holding the bent photo in one hand and the charred painting in the other. You erased me step by step, I said, voice low but shaking. The room went quiet. Neighbors who had been gatherers at the dinner fell silent, staring. Mom's face went pale. Jed's jaw tightened. Every false smile cracked in exposure. The quiet stretched like a verdict. I stepped outside into night air. Still clutching the photo, I inhaled. Jed's voice carried through the window. You'll regret this. I didn't stumble or tremble. I whispered, they burned my image. But they had no idea I still remembered every line. The burnt painting, edges charred, I framed it so the damage was visible. It felt like reclaiming something broken. I cooked light fare, bought extra chairs, and slipped in invitations to neighbors I once only waved at. The hall was modest, but full. Churchgoers, neighbors, old friends of Mom. I stood before the crowd, raw but prepared, and spoke. Not to shame, but to show. You supported me quietly, I told them. Tonight, I expose what's been hidden. The air in that hall was heavy. People waited for what came next. I cued a short clip. My mother's voice, sharp, telling me I was too much, that a daughter's duty ends where she becomes a burden. Then Jed's mocking tone, calling me our emotional weight. My own soft reply, I'm still here. The room went cold, then gasps. Whispers rippled outward. My heart pounded, not from fear, but vindication. Mom's face twisted. She blinked fast. I saw her lips quiver. A woman near the door murmured, I never knew. I inhaled slow. The recording wasn't revenge. It was release. Jed stood, outrage painted across him. He shouted, I was manipulating memories, twisting truth. Mom tried to calm things, voice stammering, this isn't how I meant. But the room no longer followed them. I held up the evidence. Torn photograph, burnt canvas, receipts, letters. I traced their lies in public. Allies who stayed silent before leaned forward. His defenses faltered. My power didn't come from loudness. It came from clarity. Then Mr. Daly, an old neighbor, approached with a slender envelope. He handed it to me, voice low. Your dad gave this to me years ago. He said only to release it if the truth was needed. I opened it. My father's handwriting greeted me. His words recognized my sacrifices, the burden he failed to ease, and a truth he wished I'd known. I was always his home. Tears slid, but they weren't pain. They were recognition. I read aloud one line. You were always my home, Laurie. The hall felt like it exhaled. I announced the steps I'd take. Reclaim my part of the house, audit the finances, serve Jed an eviction notice. Applause rippled, warm but cautious. Jed slammed the door on his way out. Mom remained silent, eyes vacant. I thanked the crowd for witnessing. I closed the night in simple words, not bitterness. Outside, cool autumn air wrapped around me like a clean slate. Later, my phone buzzed. It was Clarabelle. Laurie, you need to sit down, she said. The estate records we uncovered. They change everything. I gripped the letter Dad left, whispering, I'm listening. me, a thick folder between us, its edges frayed from handling. Her tone was steady. "It's all here. Your father transferred a portion of the house into your name 5 years before he passed." The legal binding was clear. The signature. His. Witnessed, filed, valid. Not just symbolic. My footing was real. And with that came another stack. Expense reports, renovations I'd paid out of pocket, utilities left in my name long after I moved out. Jed's quiet siphoning wasn't so quiet after all. It was theft under a familiar roof. But I didn't want blood, just balance. I told Clarabelle, "No charges. I want what's mine. That's enough." The papers were served. Jed opened the envelope on the porch, stood still for a full minute, then walked inside. No shouting, no blaming, just the slow thud of boxes packed into his pickup. Neighbors watched from their lawns. A few nodded in my direction. He didn't meet my eyes. When he backed out of the driveway, I stayed seated on the porch, calm, distant, resolved. And when his truck disappeared past the stop sign, I whispered to no one in particular, "Sometimes silence is the loudest ending." Later that week, I met Mom at the cafe where she once used to bring me after church. She looked smaller somehow, her cardigan sleeves pulled past her wrists. I didn't come for apologies, I came for closure. She fiddled with her cup before she spoke. "I failed you," she said. "I should have done better. I see that now." Her voice cracked, but she never said sorry. I didn't push. "I'm not here to be angry," I told her. "I'm here to be done." Her eyes welled. Mine didn't. I paid the check. We walked out together, but went in different directions. The house was quiet now, mine in name, mine in rhythm. I started painting again. The back garage became a small art studio. Not for profit, for healing. Neighborhood kids came in after school. Some brought their parents. We painted, told stories, sometimes just sat in silence. I kept the burnt painting on the studio wall, not to remember pain, but to honor what survived it. Over the door, I painted a quote in soft gold. "This home knows pain and still welcomes joy." Word spread. People stopped calling it Jed's family home. They called it mine. Some said I was the heart of the block. That felt strange at first. Then right. One crisp morning, I climbed into the attic. The light fell through the slats like water. I opened a small wooden box, slipped a letter inside. A note to myself, 5 years into the future. I didn't write for sentiment. I wrote for truth. I wrote about who I was, who I'd become. I named the fear. I named the courage. Then I locked the box and slid it behind an old quilt. I didn't need my family to complete me, I whispered. I needed to complete myself. That evening, I walked past the church where the community meeting once unfolded. A woman, maybe in her 40s, stood at the gate. She looked at me, unsure at first, then approached. "I heard what you did," she said. "I have a story too. Can we talk?" I opened the door and held it wide.